From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Concerns tonight about the safety of Congress members when they are gathered outside of the Capitol.
That's after this morning's shooting that injured 5 people and killed 1. The shooting took place in Alexandria, Virginia, as Republican lawmakers practice for tomorrow's congressional baseball game, an annual tradition during which Republicans and Democrats play against each other for charity. Our Washington team has been covering this tragic event all day.
Cronkite News reporter Noelle Lilly was in Alexandria this morning. Noelle, what more can you tell us?
So I was actually there live this morning when the shooting occurred in Alexandria, Virginia. I was headed back to my car to grab something from my vehicle when I heard the gunshots ring out behind me. Little did I and any of us know that what started off as a normal morning would soon turn into a federal investigation and a crime scene.
And I hear the big blam, and I thought it was a car backfiring at first until I see the rifle barrel and a white male taking careful aim at congressmen, staffers, whoever he could get a hold of.
No one could have anticipated that a simple morning baseball practice would send 5 people to the hospital, but that's exactly what happened in Alexandria, Virginia today. Republican lawmakers were practicing for their annual congressional baseball game when a man opened fire on the field. 46-year-old David Woodruff was jogging around the neighborhood when shots were fired.
This morning, I was coming down Monroe and actually happened to glance over and saw that there was a group of folks playing baseball, which I thought was a little out of place for that early in the morning, but didn't think much of it. Got about 10 more yards down the road and then immediately heard about a dozen, 14 or so gunshots go off.
Woodruff says shootings are unexpected for this neighborhood.
A pretty quiet part of Alexandria. You know, it's a family-friendly area.
Capitol Police, who were at the scene when the shooting occurred, fired back at the suspect, and Alexandria Police arrived shortly after.
Our units responded and were on scene within 3 minutes. The officers received fire from a suspect, and they returned fire, and that part of the investigation is ongoing as we speak.
Brown added that the investigation would be taken over by the FBI.
At this point, the Alexandria Police Department, because this case involves the assault on a federal officer, the Federal Bureau of Investigation will be taking over the investigation.
But despite the chaos that ensued, law enforcement officials said the community is safe.
Chiefs have said this is a secure community at this point. It's an active investigation. However, the security of the community is paramount, and I want to reassure you that that's the case.
The congressional baseball game is still scheduled to occur tomorrow at 7:05 p.m. at Nationals Park. For now, live in Washington, Noelle Lilly, Cronkite News.
2 Arizona lawmakers are on the roster to play in tomorrow's charity baseball game. Representative Ruben Gallego is playing for the Democrats, and Senator Jeff Flake is playing for the Republican team.
Senator Flake was at the practice this morning and jumped into action when Representative Scalise was shot.
I wanted to get out to Steve, finally did. I got out there and we applied pressure for a while. He was coherent, so.
Flake called Scalise's wife to let her know what had happened and talked more about what his experience was in the late morning.
You could see where he had crawled from across some of the infield and the trail of blood to where he was. He'd moved about 10 to 15 yards. Great effort to do that. I think he was trying to get away from the gunman.
This tragic event hits close to home for many Arizonans, as we are reminded of the Tucson shooting in 2011, when then Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords was shot in the head.
Today's shooting is the first time a congressman has been injured in a shooting since Giffords was attacked. Cronkite News reporter Tyler Finger is live right now in Tucson. Tyler, how are the people reacting?
Survivors of the Tucson shooting were actually together today for a meeting about the memorial to honor those who were killed at the Safeway back in January of 2011. But the meeting was scheduled long before today's tragedy, but it brought back painful memories. Tonight in Tucson, fresh wounds. Does what happened in Washington today reopen any wounds for you from what happened 6 years ago?
Yes. Absolutely.
For Pam Simon, January 8th, 2011 is a day that will stick with her. When she heard the news about today's shooting, she was taken back.
My very first response was that I know I know how it feels.
For former Congressman Ron Barber, who was shot during the Tucson attack in 2011, the political rhetoric in this country is a problem.
We need to get rid of that way of approaching politics. It has no place in a democracy. It has no place in any country, but particularly in a place where we have the right to vote. We can change our leadership by the ballot box, not by the bullet.
But now the hope is everyone comes together.
Though many people in Washington, D.C. come from somewhere else, they are today a family in the way that Tucson was a family, and I can only hope that they respond in the beautiful way that Tucson did.
Many different efforts have spawned from the Tucson tragedy. Here at Banner University Medical Center, they're focused on teaching bystanders how to respond to a tragedy like what happened today in Washington. Live in Tucson, Tyler Finger, Cronkite News. A bill that would change the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity, and sexual preference is proposed in Congress. Thousands rallied across the U.S. and in Washington, D.C. to show support for the Equality Act. Tonight, we bring you team coverage from our Washington, D.C. reporters who attended the Pride March at the Capitol over the weekend. Emma Lockhart spoke with transgender lobbyists about how they're impacting legislation on Capitol Hill, and she joins us now. Emma?
The Arizona women we spoke to were in Washington to lobby for a bill supporting equal rights for transgender people. They say it was important to bring that message directly to representatives, especially in a time when they fear rights for the LGBT community are going backwards.
Erica Kepler traveled from Phoenix to Washington to have her voice heard as a transgender woman.
We desperately need protections because our lives are very difficult, and and to live fully and equally as members of society, we need some help from government to say to people that you need to play nice with others, you need to respect your fellow citizens.
She was one of 3 Arizona women lobbying Congress to support the Equality Act, an act that will prevent discrimination in employment, housing, and public businesses. For Heather Newman from Flagstaff, it's discrimination she fears of every day.
I'm a single parent. You know, if I were to say, take my son, he's 4-year-old, he's a beautiful little boy. If I were to take him to Chuck E. Cheese, we could be turned away because I'm transgender.
Arizona does not protect people from gender identity discrimination, but Newman is still hopeful.
I think we gave them sort of a new insight into the Equality Act that they didn't have before by sort of personalizing it for them and telling our own stories.
Sharing their personal stories to try and break down the stereotypes.
We're just people like any other people who happen to be dealing with a very unusual condition of birth, and we are simply pursuing our happiness as should be our right chartered in our nation, just as it is for anybody else.
Kepler hopes this initiates change in Congress.
The Equality Act they were lobbying for has 195 co-sponsors in the House, including all 4 Arizona Democrats. That bill, introduced last month, is still waiting for a hearing. Live in Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
A new report is shining light on the condition of kids in Arizona. Unfortunately, the news isn't good. Cronkite News reporter Tyler Finger has spent the day looking over this report. He joins us now in the broadcast center with that story. Tyler, how did Arizona do this year?
Arizona once again ranked near the bottom, actually dropping a spot since last year. The Annie Casey Foundation's 2017 Kid Count report ranks Arizona 46, meaning only 4 states are worse than Arizona. One of the indicators the report looked at was preschool attendance, a time educators believe is vital to a child's success. At a preschool on Arizona State University's Tempe campus, kids start learning early.
Preschools are very much important, but the type of curriculum that's emphasized in these preschools will matter.
For Ann Kupfer, director of the Child Study Lab at ASU, preschools can't just simply be glorified daycares. It needs to provide an atmosphere that allows them to learn things like self-control.
What they emphasize is very important. So it's not just pure academics. Okay, what the real predictor of success later on is something called self-regulation skills.
In the latest Kids Count report, 60% of children aged 3 to 4 are not enrolled in school. That number dropped 3% in 5 years, but the state still ranks in the bottom 5. For Dana Wolf-Neymark at the Children's Action Alliance, the report as a whole is concerning.
Who wants to be in the bottom 5 of anything, but especially something that literally shapes our future? We should be doing much better for kids.
But back in Tempe at the Child Study Lab, Kupfer is worried about the number of parents not enrolling their kids in preschool.
I am concerned because I think the less and the more secular you are and secluded from this diversity, that children are going to be at a disadvantage.
Arizona sits 10% below the national average for young kids not in school. Some bright spots in the report: the rate of child and teen deaths dropped nearly 15% from 2010 to 2015, putting it below the national average. Also, the percentage of kids living in families where no parent has a full-time job improved more than the national trend. In the broadcast center, Tyler Finger, Cronkite News.
The relationship between Washington and Mexico has been chilly in recent months, with President Donald Trump calling for everything from a border wall to a new deal on the North American Free Trade Agreement. But Arizona Governor Doug Ducey was in Washington today to call for a thaw in that relationship. Reporter Emma Lockhart has more on the governor's address today.
We're believers in free and fair trade, and as governor, I want to do everything I can to build the quality of life in the state of Arizona.
Quality of life that relies on a strong trade relationship with Mexico. That was a message Governor Ducey delivered at a conference at the Wilson Center today. The upcoming renegotiation of NAFTA remains a pressing issue for the governor. Despite being a supporter of free trade, he is still open to improvement.
There are other issues and political realities that happen at the border, and that's where having a good relationship where you can communicate and put problem solvers together, set a timeline and set a goal that Arizona is benefiting from.
He also brought up critical issues like drug trafficking at the border, a problem he says can be combated through stronger Arizona-Mexico relations.
The world has changed tremendously since the early 1990s. So in the light of that, let's take a look at the agreement and see where we can do better.
Ducey said he is committed to building that relationship even more. In Washington, Emma Lockhart, Cronkite News.
Governor Ducey will join business leaders and policymakers at the Arizona-Mexico Commission Summit in June.
I think I finally found my hallelujah. I've been waiting for this moment all my life. Now all my dreams are coming true. Yeah, I've been waiting for this moment. It's good to be alive right about now.
A new executive order today from Governor Doug Ducey. Today's order requires the reporting of opioid overdoses, making sure state health officials have information within 24 hours.
So this is going to help us identify what communities are at risk, what demographic groups are at risk, what are we seeing right now. We have an indication that there may be a lot of polysubstance use or other drugs, but we don't have a great picture on that. So it's going to provide us with more detail on how to combat the opioid epidemic.
Doctors, first responders, and pharmacists are among those required to provide reports. In addition, the Department of Health will begin testing blood samples from suspected opioid deaths. The new reporting requirement goes into effect 48 hours after it was issued.
Concerns tonight from the court-appointed committee providing feedback to the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Last night, the first of several community meetings took place, and while Sheriff Penzone recently closed in city, organizers are calling for more. Emotions running high at last night's Community Advisory Board meeting, and with that, calls for newly elected Sheriff Pinzón to listen to the Latino community and build what many here refer to as trust between the two.
I think the first step would be for him to have a forum, an open forum, where he would allow the community to give their voices and to talk, and him actually stay through the meeting.
Isabel Chagres is one of those people who would like to be heard. She spent 3 months in Joe Arpaio's tent city. It was too painful, she said, for her to even share her story on camera.
We have a new sheriff.
And it is this type of fear and experiences members of the CAB want Sheriff Pinzón to take into consideration. James Collins, Director of Community Outreach, was at the meeting on behalf of Sheriff Pinzón.
I heard that, and I also heard a number of things about fear and trust too. So the sheriff has put together 4 advisory committees, and he's trying to reach out to all entities.
But the committees Director Collins talks about are not inclusive, says Dr. Maldonado. She's one of 3 appointed to the Community Advisory Board by the ACLU after a court order in 2013 resulting from racial profiling by deputies. The board, according to the ACLU, is to, quote, work with the community and court-appointed monitor to gather concerns and provide feedback about MCSO policies and practices, using meetings like this one. Last month, in what was seen by many here as a first good step, the new sheriff closed Tent City.
And that's a good step. But again, the policies that are still creating fear in our communities are still there. Him working, he's choosing to allow, for example, immigration in his jails.
The sheriff has spoken on that matter extensively. ICE is in the jail, but they're on the tail ends. They have an area that they contact everyone, they look at everyone, and then they deal with these individuals before they're released from the jail.
Many spoke at the meeting and seemed encouraged by an opportunity for both parties to openly talk. Director Collins promised he will share their concerns with Sheriff Pinzón, but for now, both parties seem to agree in one thing, that there still is a long ways to go.
For those who are deaf, calling 911 in an emergency isn't always an option, but some departments are now using a texting system. I spoke to Lake Havasu PD and a deaf specialist about how this helps those with speech and hearing difficulties.
They always have that fear of not having immediate access to emergency services.
Becca Bailey is deaf and knows firsthand what it's like not to be able to quickly communicate during an emergency. She shared her experiences with us through a translator. Right now, Lake Havasu City is the only city in the state to have 911 texting capabilities.
It's important in a lot of different situations. We've had a lot of positive feedback from the deaf, hard of hearing, and speech impaired community. This gives them direct and immediate access to our 911 services. But it can also be used in the event of an emergency where someone can't make a voice call.
Bailey says people of the deaf and hard of hearing community in the Valley are frustrated that it's not available everywhere. Typically, people contact the police department by calling 911, but connecting with police through voice call isn't as practical for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing. In the event of an emergency, people of the deaf and hard of hearing community have to communicate with police through a third party. Becca Bailey said it took her nearly 3 hours to get help when she got into an accident. In order for someone who is deaf or hard of hearing to contact police, they have to first contact an interpreter through a video relay service. The VRS operator will then contact police and act as a middleman, relaying information back and forth.
So during text, we can text directly with the operator ourselves and have faster access to those services, and it results in a more effective communication.
Bailey says that the problem with VRS is that it doesn't work well without Wi-Fi, and there's a delay in getting information out quickly.
And there are some situations that have come up where they've tried to reach 911 even through a non-emergency phone number, and it's been a struggle and it's been very frustrating for people. So we do need to have that here in the state of Arizona.
The Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing is hopeful that Maricopa County will have text to 911 within 6 to 12 months. Since implementing the system in April, Lake Havasu PD has received 11 text messages, with 2 of them being success stories. Last Thursday, students across Arizona went to the FBI field office in Phoenix to get a first-hand look at what the agency does. Cronkite News reporter Tyler Paley was one of those students, and he learned it's no walk in the park.
Ever wonder what it takes to be a special agent in the FBI? Just ask one of the 25 students who took part in the Bureau's annual Teen Youth Academy last week.
I don't think you could learn this anywhere else. The people that are teaching it are the best of the best.
The FBI's Phoenix division has been hosting this Teen Youth Academy for the last 20 years. It's a full day of real-life training for students from across the state.
We've got instructors, which are agents, analysts, folks from our forensic, our professional support, that will come in and, again, teach them about what the FBI does.
It's a recruitment tool for the agency as much as it's a glimpse into federal law enforcement for the students.
I just want to gain a more general idea of the FBI, and it's something that I hopefully hope to do in the future.
I think there is an attraction to the FBI and what we do.
Students have the opportunity all day to partake in hands-on demonstrations like these, like this one where they had to dress up and handle mock hazardous materials.
I've learned a lot. I've learned that there's so much that goes into being in the FBI, and there's so many different things that you can do.
A lot of folks don't have a real idea or understanding what the FBI does.
After Thursday's academy, 25 of those folks certainly have a better understanding. And as for Dominique, well, she's completely bought in.
Terrorism sounds really interesting, something within that field, or even I thought the undercover agent was really cool.
The FBI will also host 2 more teen academies in Yuma and Tucson later this summer.
De Leon says the FBI doesn't keep track of agents who join the Bureau after participating in the Teen Youth Academy, but he hopes the agency will start monitoring those stats soon. For now, live in the Broadcast Center, Tyler Paley, Cronkite News.
It is Monsoon Awareness Week, and the Arizona Department of Transportation is telling drivers to pull aside and stay alive when encountering dust storms. Cronkite News reporter Holly Bernstein has more safety tips you should follow. Holly?
The heat is not the only weather Arizonans need to be aware of this summer. Driving during a dust storm can be dangerous. Here are some tips on how to stay safe. June 15th is the official start of the monsoon season. And while we aren't expecting storms this week, the Arizona Department of Transportation is reminding drivers how to stay safe when dust storms do arrive. ADOT's top tip is to not drive in a dust storm. Dust storms can result in little to no visibility on roads. If you encounter a dust storm, immediately check the traffic around your vehicle, front, back, and side, and begin slowing down. ADOT says don't wait until poor visibility makes it difficult to safely pull off the roadway. Instead, you should do this as soon as possible and completely exit the highway if you can. Always look for a safe place to pull completely off the paved portion of the road, and turn off all vehicle lights, including your emergency flashers. Doing this will help prevent other vehicles approaching from behind to use your lights as a guide and possibly crashing into your parked vehicle. Set your emergency brake, take your foot off the brake, and stay in your car with your seatbelt on and wait for the storm to pass. ADOT says drivers of high-profile vehicles should be especially aware of changing weather conditions and slow down. ADOT says it's starting construction soon on a new dust detection zone on I-10 between Eloy and Picacho. Signs will warn drivers of dangerous conditions. Holly Bernstein, Cronkite News.
Fiesta Bowl Charities partnered with a local organization to provide young single moms and their families a well-deserved break. Cronkite News reporter Anika Walters was in Scottsdale with moms and kids enjoying this staycation.
Helping Hands for Single Moms began in 2002 after founder Chris Kaufman ran into a little boy lost on the street and returned him to his mother.
I started thinking, what can we do to help single moms?
15 years later, that one little boy turned into 24 families. Kaufman's organization, Helping Hands for Single Moms, supports mothers obtaining a college degree and financial independence.
Our goal is to come alongside a family while the mom goes to college, a single mom. And so we try to provide supportive services that'll help build resilient families and then also help the mom succeed in college.
The organization receives the support of Fiesta Bowl Charities to give the families a weekend away to celebrate moms' accomplishments. Volunteer Kelly Schindler says the most rewarding part is the smiles she sees.
My favorite part of today is being able to see the look on the moms' faces of pure pride. They're so excited of what the future has in store for them, and we couldn't be more proud.
Now, of course, a relaxing staycation at the Embassy Suites in Scottsdale is something to celebrate, but for mothers here, this weekend is about so much more.
Being able to share the success of my graduation with my kids. I worked hard, but they also worked hard on the other end, just waiting for me to come home.
In 2015, more than 1/3 of Arizona households were run by single parents, according to ArizonaHealthMatters.org. In Scottsdale, Annika Walters, Cronkite News.
And Helping Hand for Single Moms and Fiesta Bowl charities recognize 11 mothers for finishing their college degrees this year.
One of Arizona's own went from the Reese's All-Star game during Final Four weekend in Glendale to a pre-draft workout with the Suns. I spoke with him about carrying on his father's legacy. After a standout high school basketball career at Phoenix's Brophy Prep and being named two-time Patriot League Player of the Year at Lehigh University, Tim Kempton Jr. is trying to follow in his father's footsteps after working out for the Suns last week in advance of the June 22nd NBA draft.
I mean, the franchise means a whole lot to me. I mean, my dad played on, what do you want to call the glory days of the Phoenix Suns when they made their run. And to now be able to kind of see the transition that they're making and rebuilding their team and to be able to make that run again. To even think that I could be a part of that is another amazing experience.
Kempton Jr.'s father, Tim Kempton Sr., went to the NBA Finals with the Suns in 1993 and is now the team's radio color commentator.
It was definitely fun seeing him down on that practice court. We've been down there a lot since he's been home working out, he and I by ourselves, so it was a lot of fun to see him work out.
Following his pre-draft workout with the Suns, Kempton Jr. told me there's something in the Valley he must do before he leaves.
Arizona people don't go see the Grand Canyon, so I've been seeing the Grand Canyon since I was born, living out here all my days, but crossing this off the list was a big one.
While Kempton Jr. hopes to hear his name called on the draft night, he knows free agency is also a possibility. Kempton Jr. averaged 20 points and 10 rebounds per game while at Lehigh University.